How do you know when it's time to change your mind? We often take pride in being consistent, and in recent episodes, we explored exactly why that matters. Holding our ground, standing by our beliefs, being certain in what we know. Consistency feels like strength, and in many ways, it is. But in a world that is constantly changing, consistency can slowly become something else. It can become rigidity. What was true before may no longer be true now. What once gave you an advantage may no longer move you forward. And yet, changing your mind is not easy because it doesn't just challenge your thinking, it challenges your identity. So here's the question. How do you stay open to new information without losing your sense of direction? How do you update your thinking without constantly second-guessing yourself? Because changing your mind goes beyond flexibility. It is a strategic skill. And in a world that evolves faster than ever, knowing when to change your mind may matter more than simply being right. Welcome to The Strategic Thinker, TST for short. If you're a returning listener, thank you for being here. If this is your first time with us, I'm glad you found your way here. TST is a sanctuary for your mind, a calm space away from the noise where you can pause, think more deeply, and reset your direction. Every conversation here is designed to help you approach life, work, and decisions with more intention and more clarity. I'm Alan, your host. Let's dive in. In recent episodes, we explored long-term thinking. We talked about the speed trap, how modern systems pull us towards immediacy, and what it takes to turn long-term thinking into something real through consistent action over time. That conversation was about direction, choosing a path, and staying with it long enough for it to compound. Today, we explore something equally important, because direction on its own is only part of the picture. The world does not stay still. Technology evolves, industries shift, assumptions that once felt solid begin to change, and sometimes that path that once made complete sense no longer does. This is where a different skill becomes essential, the ability to update your thinking thoughtfully, intentionally. Because long-term thinking is about knowing when to stay the course and when to adjust it. So today, we explore that balance, how to change your mind without losing your direction, and how to stay aligned with reality in a world that keeps moving. One of the most important ideas to sit with is this. What is true today may not remain true tomorrow. Truth in many areas of life is fluid. It's shaped by context, by environment, by time. What worked before may stop working. What created advantage before may become less relevant. This is simply the nature of a changing world. Consider skills. At one point, learning to code created a strong and clear advantage. It required specialized knowledge. It opened doors that were otherwise closed. Today, that skill is still valuable, but the environment has shifted. Tools have improved dramatically. Access has expanded. Artificial intelligence has lowered the barrier to entry in ways that would have been difficult to imagine even a few years ago. The advantage remains, but its relative value has changed. And that shift matters because if you're still making decisions based on the old picture, you are navigating with an outdated map. Even when the world changes, our thinking often lags behind because what once worked creates confidence. It becomes part of how we see the world, part of how we define ourselves, part of the story we tell about who we are and how we got here. And over time, beliefs can begin to feel permanent. because they have been true for long enough. When we treat time-dependent truth as though they are permanent, something subtle begins to happen. Updating stops. We continue applying the same thinking, even as the environment quietly moves on. And this is how misalignment begins, through slow and almost invisible drift. Everything still feels familiar. Everything still feels like us. And yet, something is no longer quite right. Once you see that truth evolves, a new question emerges. How do I relate to what I believe as the world around me continues to change? So, if updating our thinking is so important, why is it so difficult? Because changing your mind is a deeply emotional process. And I think most of us know this from experience. Over time, our beliefs become more than ideas. They become part of who we are. They shape how we see the world, how we make decisions, how we make sense of our past. And when new information challenges those beliefs, it can feel deeply personal. And beyond this idea might be wrong, lies something far more uncomfortable. I might be wrong. And that is a much harder thing to sit with. There's also a natural human desire for consistency. We want our beliefs, our actions, and our decisions to align. Consistency builds trust in ourselves and in others. It creates a sense of stability in an uncertain world. But taken too far, consistency quietly becomes rigidity. We find ourselves defending a belief long after the evidence has shifted, because changing it would feel like losing something. And then there's the way we naturally process information. We tend to notice what supports what we already believe. We give more weight to familiar ideas. We filter out, often without realizing it, what challenges them. Over time, this creates a loop that reinforces itself. The belief feels stronger and more certain, simply because it has been confirmed so many times. This is confirmation bias, and it operates quietly beneath the surface in all of us. This is what makes changing your mind genuinely difficult. It requires letting go of something that once felt certain. It requires creating space for a perspective that feels unfamiliar. And it requires a particular kind of honesty, the kind where you can pause and say, what I believed before may no longer be the best way to see this. That takes courage, more than most people acknowledge. Once you understand this resistance, the challenge is knowing when to hold and when to update. Once you understand that truth evolves and that resistance is natural, a more practical question begins to form. When should you actually change your mind? Changing too slowly creates one kind of problem. Changing too often creates another. The first is staying fixed. You continue using the same thinking, even as the environment shifts around you. At first, everything still works. Then slowly, things begin to feel harder. Outcomes become less predictable. Process slows in ways that are difficult to explain. This is rarely sudden. It is usually gradual. Your thinking has become outdated, and familiarity keeps you hanging on to it until something eventually breaks. The second is changing too frequently. Every new idea feels compelling. Every new signal feels urgent and important. Direction keeps shifting. Decisions become inconsistent, and over time, progress becomes difficult to sustain because consistency, the very thing that creates compounding, is never given enough time. Both failure modes feel reasonable in the moment. That is what makes them worth understanding. A helpful way to think about this is through the image of a map. Your beliefs are your map. The world is the terrain. If your map is outdated, you move in the wrong direction. Confidently, perhaps, but wrongly. If you redraw your map every few steps, you may never move far enough to get anywhere meaningful. The goal lives in that fine balance between constant change and rigid consistency. Updating your map when the terrain has meaningfully shifted and trusting it long enough to make real progress. Not all thinking needs to be updated at the same pace. Some things benefit from stability, others require more regular review. Your daily actions may shift frequently, your tactics may evolve month to month, your strategy unfolds over a longer arc. And your core principles, the deepest beliefs about who you are and what you stand for, those shift most slowly of all. Understanding which level you're operating at helps you decide how often to revisit it. In faster environments, you may need to question your assumptions more regularly. In more stable periods, consistency becomes the more valuable discipline. Once you begin to see your thinking this way, changing your mind is no longer a reaction to pressure or doubt. It becomes a deliberate decision. Before we arrive at today's insight, there is something worth pausing on. Recognizing that your thinking needs to evolve is one thing. Acting on it is where the real work begins, because changing your mind is as emotional as it is intellectual. It almost always involves letting go. Letting go of an idea that once worked. Letting go of a belief that helped you get to where you are today. And sometimes, the most difficult of all, letting go of a version of yourself. This is where it becomes most challenging because we are attached to what we already know. An idea may no longer serve us, but it still feels familiar. It still feels like us. So we hold on a little longer than we probably should. We have all done this. I have. And there is no shame in it. The awareness of it, though, that's where the shift begins. Updating your thinking requires a particular kind of effort. Not just analysis, but honesty. The quiet, sometimes uncomfortable kind. Where you can pause and ask yourself, is this still true? Or is this simply something I have believed for a long time? Those two things are different, and learning to tell them apart is one of the most valuable thinking skills you can develop. This is not something you do once and move on from. Retake. This is not something you do once and move on from. It is a practice, a habit of returning to your assumptions with intention, deliberately. Because strategic clarity comes from knowing what is worth keeping and having the honesty and courage to let go what is not. And perhaps that's the real skill, knowing when your thinking needs to change. Here's today's insight. Changing your mind is not a sign that you were wrong. It is a sign that you are still thinking. What once served you may not always serve you. What once felt true may no longer fit the world you are navigating today. The goal is to hold beliefs with open hands. Keep what still serves you, releasing what no longer does, and staying aligned with reality as it continues to evolve. Clarity comes from awareness to question what you know, and the honesty to update it when the moment calls for it. Because in a world that keeps changing, the ability to rethink deliberately, courageously, and without losing your sense of self may just be one of the most valuable things you can cultivate. Let's bring this home. The world we are navigating does not stand still. What is true today may evolve, and what works today may need to be revisited, and the beliefs that once guide us may, in time, need to be refined. This is the nature of growth. We explored how changing your mind is about staying aligned with reality as it shifts, a very different thing from inconsistency. We explored how ego, identity, and the comfort of familiarity can quietly hold us in place, and how the real skill is not constant change, but thoughtful, intentional updating. So the question worth carrying with you is, what makes the most sense now with what I know today? As you move into the days ahead, notice which beliefs you are holding on to most tightly. Notice which ones still genuinely serve you, and notice which ones may be quietly ready for a second look. Because growth comes from the willingness to rethink and move forward with greater clarity and greater honesty. If you prefer to revisit today's ideas in writing, The Compass is a published companion to each episode, a concise reference you can return to. You'll find it at maisontst.com. And if these conversations are adding something to your journey, the simplest way to make sure you never miss one is to follow the show wherever you listen. Think of it as reserving your seat in the sanctuary. As always, thank you for choosing to spend this time here with me. Your future self is being shaped by the choices you make today. Stay focused on your direction and take time to discover joy along the way. Until next time, make your next best decision and keep moving forward.